On June 9th, 1964, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said to one of his primary first lieutenants, Andrew Young, "Get down to St. Augustine immediately and tell the marchers there, the marchers for civil rights, to not hold the big demonstration that was planned for that evening." King said, "We're close to having the legislation passed, and just get down there," he said to Young, "and tell them not to march." Andrew Young was only in his mid-30s at the time. He would go on to distinguish himself as a two-term mayor of the city of Atlanta, as a member of the House of Representatives, as the ambassador to the United Nations, as appointed by President James Carter, and he would be a clergyman and a public speaker and an author, a distinguished man. But this is when he was just getting started in his early 30s. And so he took a plane from Washington to Jacksonville, and he gave this story. I heard him tell it in a church 6 or 8 years ago. He said all the way down from Jacksonville to St. Augustine, he was preparing, how am I going to be able to stop these people from marching? Well, he had his little speech prepared, and he walked into the church, and the church was filled with people. And such was their enthusiasm that they carried him right out of the church, and before he knew it, he was leading the march that he had been sent there by King to stop. When they got to the Plaza de la Constitución, he told the people marching with him, several hundred, "You wait right here at this southwest corner. I'm just going to go across the plaza and talk to the good old boys who were over there on the northeast counter." And so by himself, he walked to that area where the former slave market took place. He approached the men standing there, and they let him come in quietly, and he began by saying, "I want to speak to," and bam! Over his head, he was hit with a blackjack, a lead sap that put him right on the ground, and nearly unconscious he lay there. He managed to shake it off and to stand and begin again. "I just want to say," and again he was clobbered, this time by a closed fist, and down he went a second time. He lay there on the ground trying to shake off this assault and started to get up again, and the crowd was on him, hitting him, kicking him in the front and in the back and in the head. And just then, a police officer interceded and said, "Let him speak. Let's not let this go any further." And so Andrew Young shook off what had just happened to him, the assault, and he said what he had come there to say. And then he turned around and he walked back to the crowd 100 yards away who had seen what had taken place there. Dr. King, of course, heard of this assault, and 2 days later, on the 11th of April, 1964, the 11th of June, 1964, he came to St. Augustine. He came with another of his primary lieutenants, Ralph Abernathy, and together they went to the Monson Motor Lodge, which was the focal point of all the civil rights demonstrations in St. Augustine. St. Augustine, which had been described by Dr. King as the most violent city in the South. Not Selma, not Montgomery, not Washington, but St. Augustine. He and Abernathy went to the Monson Motor Lodge, and he stood on the steps just before going in, and James Brock, the owner, manager, came to him and said, "You can't come in here, boys." And they said, Dr. King said, "We just want to come in and get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or whatever." He said, "No, you're not allowed. This is a segregated restaurant and you're not coming in." And King persisted, "Well, we just want to come in and sit down." And Brock said, "If you don't leave, I'm calling the police." And he did call the police, and the police came and they arrested Dr. King and Ralph Abernathy, the only place in Florida where Dr. King was arrested, here in St. Augustine. He went to jail, and soon thereafter, while in that jail cell, he wrote a letter to his friend, Rabbi Israel Dresner, and he said to him, he was a friend, Dresner had visited King when King was locked up in Albany, Georgia. And in the subsequent years, King would preach at the temple in Springfield, New Jersey. But here he is locked up, and he wrote to Cy Dresner, why don't you get some of your buddy rabbis to come on down and join the protest? And that's exactly what Cy Dresner did. And on June 14th, 1964, Cy Dresner showed up with 16 rabbis, including himself, and they marched in protest, and they were all arrested in what was the biggest arrest of Jewish clergy in the history of the United States. While they were in jail, they wrote a letter explaining why they had gone to St. Augustine. And it is my privilege now to read to you that letter, which is dated June 19th, 1964. Dear friend, St. Augustine is the oldest city in the United States. It was here on St. Augustine's Day, August 28, 1565, that Pedro Menendez de Avilas first sighted land. In 1965, it will celebrate its 400th anniversary. Indeed, it has requested federal funds to enhance this historic observance. St. Augustine has other distinguishing characteristics. In American history books yet to be written, this small, neatly kept Florida community will long be remembered as a symbol of a harsh, rigidly segregated, clan-dominated, backward-looking city which mocked the spirit of the doughty African-born, dark, pigmented priest for whom it was named. St. Augustine is a tourist town. By far the highest percentage of its income comes from the visitors who walk through its quaint streets staring at excavations from the 18th century, only now being restored. Most visitors stop at the slave market, supposedly only a relic of bygone days. True, they no longer sell slaves in that market, but let no one be deceived into thinking that there no longer exists among this town's white residents the mental attitude and the psychology which first put slaves on those trading blocks. The spirit of racial arrogance persists and is reinforced by the sway of terror long exerted by hooded and unhooded mobsters. We went to St. Augustine in response to the appeal of Martin Luther King, addressed to the CCAR conference, in which he asked us to join with him in a creative witness to our joint convictions of equality and racial justice. We came because we realized that injustice in St. Augustine, as anywhere else, diminishes the humanity of each of us. If St. Augustine is to be not only an ancient city, but also a great-hearted city, it will not happen until the raw hate, the ignorant prejudices, the unrecognized fears which now grip so many of its citizens are exorcised from its soul. We came then not as tourists, but as ones who perhaps quixotically thought we could add a bit to the healing process of America. We were arrested on Thursday, June 18, 1964. 15 of us were arrested while praying in an integrated group in front of Monson's restaurant. 2 of us were arrested for sitting down at a table with 3 Negro youngsters in the Chimes restaurant. We pleaded not guilty to the charges against us. Shortly after our confinement in the St. Johns County Jail, we shared with one another our real inner motives. They are, as might be expected, mixed. We have tried to be honest with one another about the wrong as well as the right, motives which have prompted us. These hours have been filled with a sense of surprise and discovery, of fear and affirmation, of self-doubt and belief in God. We came to St. Augustine mainly because we could not stay away. We could not say no to Martin Luther King, whom we always respected and admired, and whose loyal friends we hope we shall be in the days to come. We could not pass by the opportunity to achieve a moral goal by moral means, a rare modern privilege which has been the glory of the nonviolent struggle for civil rights. We came because we could not stand quietly by our brother's blood. We had done that too many times before. We have been vocal in our exhortation of others, but the idleness of our hands too often revealed an inner silence. Silence at a time when silence has become the unpardonable sin of our time. We came in the hope that the God of us all would accept our small involvement as partial atonement for the many things we wish we had done before and often. We came as Jews who remember the millions of faceless people who stood quietly watching the smoke rise from Hitler's crematoria. We came because we know that second only to silence, the greatest danger to man is loss of faith in man's capacity to act. Here in St. Augustine, we have seen the depths of anger, resentment, and fury. We have seen faces that expressed a deep, implacable hatred. What disturbs us more deeply is the large number of decent citizens who have stood aside, unable to bring themselves to act, yet knowing in their hearts that this cause is right and that it must inevitably triumph. We believe, though we could not count on it in advance, that our presence and actions have been of practical effect. They have reminded the embattled Negroes here that they are not isolated and alone. The conscience of the wicked has been troubled, while that of the righteous has gained new strength. We are more certain than before that this cause is invincible, but we also have a sharpened awareness of the great effort and sacrifice which will be required. We pray that what we have done may lead us on to further actions and persuade others who still stand hesitantly to take the stand they know is just. We came from different backgrounds and with different degrees of involvement. Some of us have had intimate experience with the struggle of minority groups to achieve full and equal rights in our widely scattered home communities. Others of us have had less direct contact with the underprivileged and the socially oppressed, and yet, for all these brief, tension-packed hours of openness and communication turned an abstract social issue into something personal and immediate. We shall not forget the people with whom we drove, prayed, marched, slept, ate, demonstrated, and were arrested. How little we know of these people and their struggle. What we have learned has changed us and our attitudes. We are grateful for the rare experience of sharing with this courageous community in their life, their suffering, their effort. we pray that we may remain more sensitive and more alive as a result. We shall not soon forget the stirring and heartfelt excitement with which the Negro community greeted us with full-throated hymns and alleluias, which pulsated and resounded through the church, nor the bond of affectionate solidarity which joined us hand in hand during our marches through town, nor the exaltation which lifted our voices and hearts in unison, nor the common purpose which transcended our fears as well as the boundaries of race, geography, and circumstance. We hope we have strengthened the morale of St. Augustine Negroes as they strive to claim their dignity and humanity. We know they have strengthened ours. Each of us has, in this experience, become a little more the person, a bit more the rabbi he always hoped to be but has not yet been able to become. We believe in man's ability to fulfill God's commands with God's help. We make no messianic estimate of man's power, and certainly not of what we did here. But it has reaffirmed our faith in the significance of the deed. So we must confess in all humility that we did this as much in fulfillment of our faith and in response to inner need as in service to our Negro brothers. We came to stand with our brothers, and in the process have learned more about ourselves and our God. In obeying Him, we become ourselves. In following His will, we fulfill ourselves. He has guided, sustained, and strengthened us in a way that we could not manage on our own. We are deeply grateful to the good influences which have sustained and strengthened us in a way we could not manage on our own. We are deeply grateful to the good influences which have sustained us in our moments of trial and friendship. Often we thought of parents, wives, children, congregants, particularly our teenage youth, and of our teachers and students. How many a Torah reading, Passover celebration, prayer book text, and sermonic effort has come to mind in these hours. And how meaningful has been our worship, morning and evening, as we recited the ancient texts in this new yet Jewishly familiar setting. We are particularly grateful for what we have received from our comrades in this visit. We have been sustained by the understanding, thoughtfulness, consideration, and good humor we have received from each other. Never have the bonds of Judaism and the fellowship of the rabbinate been more clearly expressed to us all, or more deeply felt by each of us. These words were first written at 3 a.m. in the sweltering heat of a sleepless night by the light of one naked bulb hanging in the corridor outside our small cell. They were, ironically, scratched on the back of the pages of a mimeographed report of the bloody assaults of the Ku Klux Klan in St. Augustine. At daybreak, we revisited the contents of the letter and prayed together for a new dawn of justice and mercy for all the children of God. We do not underestimate what yet remains to be done in the North as well as the South, In the battle against racism, we have participated here in only a skirmish, but the total effect of all such demonstrations has created a revolution, and the conscience of the nation has been aroused as never before. The Civil Rights Bill will become law, and much more progress will be attained because this national conscience has been touched in this and other places in the struggle. We praise and bless God for his mighty acts on our behalf. Baruch atah Adonai matir asurim. Blessed art thou, O Lord, who freest the captives. The letter is signed by Rabbi Eugene Borowitz, Rabbi Balfour Brickner, Rabbi Israel Dresner, Rabbi Daniel Fogel, Rabbi Gerald Goldstein, Rabbi Joel Gour, Rabbi Joseph Herzog, Rabbi Norman Hirsch, Rabbi Leon Jick, Rabbi Richard Levy, Rabbi Eugene Lipman, Rabbi Michael Robinson, Rabbi B.T. Rubenstein, Rabbi Murray Saltzman, Rabbi Alan Setcher, Rabbi Clyde T. Sills, and also Mr. Albert Vorspan, Director of the Social Action Committee of the Reform Judaism Movement. Thank you.